All right, everyone, here we go. We're going to start out with a prototype of Apple Picker. So, chapter 28 of Intro to Game Design, Prototyping, and Development. This is the second edition, and we're using 2018.4 Unity as our platform. And so, the approach here is not to have fully refined digital assets or anything like that. It's really to make something playable. And so that's why we're using the word prototype. We're trying to make sure that the game is fun to play. It doesn't have to look great, doesn't have to have all the bells and whistles, but it should be fully playable. And so that's kind of where we're starting with this. But we're also starting with a new Unity project for the first time. And so what we're going to try and do. So let me just close my Zoom just to make sure that the spies aren't spying on me. And so we're going to go into the Unity Hub, and we're going to create a new project. And what you'll note is that 2018.4 is listed here. 2019.4 is also listed here. And I'm going to use 2018.4 to be consistent with the book. I'm going to choose a 3D game. I'm going to name this Apple Picker Prototype in line with how Gibson Bond wants us to name this. And I'm going to click Create. And once we get in here, we're going to name a couple of scripts. Notice that on the screen right now, you'll see Apple Picker, Apple Tree, and Basket as script names that we'll create, but we're just going to create them. We're not going to code them up or anything like that. So we're also going to start out with a scene, and that scene name is _scene_0 to stick with the naming convention that Jeremy Gibson Bond has established for us. So also be reminded that Appendix A of the book has a standard installation type of deal that we're going to use, or a standard setup. Be also reminded that somewhere in the book there was a note about creating a game layout up in the right hand corner, and I know this screen is terribly small and I need to figure out a better way to zoom in on things. That's going to be forthcoming, but in the interest of making it happen, I almost cussed in a video, but in the interest of making it happen, I want to make sure that we get things squared away. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rename this scene _scene_0. There we go. And then what I want to do under here, under assets, is I'm going to go up to create. And I know I'm just dreadfully tiny, but we're going to go to the second one on the list. It's this C# script that we're going to create. And the first one we're going to call is Apple Picker. Right? We're going to do that same thing again with the C# script. We're going to call this one Basket. And let me flip back to my screen so I can see. I don't want to screw this up. Apple Picker, Apple Tree, and Basket. We need Apple Picker, Apple Tree, and Basket. Okay, so those are our 4 C# scripts that we'll need for this video and this exercise. And what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to just stay on screen with you so you can see that I'm actually here behind the screen here. All right, so if I do zoom in on something, this will help at least for you to see what you're supposed to be seeing here. And so that's what your project pane should look like. Your hierarchy should look pretty absent of anything interesting here. So, but we do want to make sure that our main camera is set up the right way. And so I flip back over to here, and I know in Appendix A he has something to say about the camera. So let's take a look at the camera. It says attach the C# script. It's like she sells seashells by the seashore. Attach the C# script to the scene's main camera, and we're not doing this just yet, but we'll get there. All right, so I think we're set up the right way, and we read chapter 16. We're ready for these things to happen, and so the getting started of this is to create the art assets, and we're going to start with the Apple Tree. Right? So from the Unity menu bar, I'm going to choose Game Object, 3D Object Cylinder, and we're going to put in some of these settings here. And so I'm going to go back to Unity. I'm going to go to Game Object, 3D Object, and then Cylinder. There we go. And so this is going to be our trunk. We're going to set the name of the cylinder to trunk. And so right here in the hierarchy, we can double click on that. It's a slow double click. You can also right click on it, but I'm going to call this trunk. All right. And then when we're looking at this, and then we'll do the configuration of this. So the transform component of the cylinder needs to match what's in 28.1. So we're going to do zeros for position rotation, and then scale is going to be 1 and 1. We're going to make sure that it has a cylinder mesh. And we're going to look at a couple of other things here real quick. But it looks as though over here, if we zoom in, we see that trunk is listed, and it seems like everything is A-OK with how this is done. You'll notice a few things in this inspector. You'll see the tag and then the layer. Those are going to come into play very shortly. And there's also, you see the cylinder has a mesh filter around it, and that mesh is going to be a cylinder shape, cylinder styled mesh on there. And that allows that shape to be rendered as we see it here. Okay. So you also note that he's using a particular style of notation here, the P with an XYZ, the R of an XYZ, and S of the XYZ. So that's position, rotation, and scale. So that will help us to get a sense for things. We're creating the crudest of art. So the second thing that we're going to create is a game object as a sphere, and it has some different settings here. And so you feel free to move right along with this. And I'm just going to do this in order, just to make sure that everybody is on the same page here. The settings here are position for this sphere. It's going to be 0, 0, and then 0.5, then 0. The scale is going to be, I think it's 3, 4, 3. Is that right? 3, 2, 3. Whoops. And what's kind of fun is this doesn't have to be perfect. It really doesn't. But we're getting some practice with how the objects are. And so we have two objects, and you can see down here in the rendering that it does kind of look like a tree. It's a very crudely drawn tree. Now we're going to create a third game object, and this is going to be an empty game object. And what this game object is going to be called, I believe it's going to be called tree. It is game object empty for now, but we'll leave it as such. So game object, we have 1, 1, 1, 1 here, and this is going to be a container for our object, and we're going to name the game object apple tree. Wait, so we're going to come back in here, and I'm going to name this apple tree. All right, and so what you should have thus far is a little indication that you have your camera, you have your directional light, you're going to get that with each scene, and then you have trunk, we have sphere, and then we have apple tree here. I'm pretty sure I was supposed to name sphere something. I was naming it leaves. So let me go in there and rename that. My apologies. And then I don't want to rush ahead of things because I want to get it right. So in the hierarchy pane, we are going to change the name of game object to apple tree, which we have done. So we have apple tree over here. We have leaves and trunk. And then we're going to individually drag the trunk and leaves game objects onto apple tree. Okay. And so we're going to take trunk and drag it down to apple tree. We're going to take leaves and drag it down to apple tree. And of course, one of you is going to wonder, can I select both of these and then move it down to apple tree? And of course you can. But I think he was being very particular to say that, maybe slow your roll a little bit and just do things by the book for a minute or two. So so that's where we are thus far. What I'm going to do is I'm also going to save everything right now. So I'm going to hit save on the keyboard, which is the Command S. I want to make sure that I'm doing that fairly often. So for me, it's like a reaction. It's as soon as I breathe, I hit save anymore. But you'll want to get into the habit, and you'll know that if something has changed in your project. So like if I undo something, right, you'll see that there's a little star here. Let me zoom in on this guy. Here you'll see that little star. What that little star indicates is that you have not saved the current version of this project. So I'm gonna redo what I did before, and I'm gonna hit save, and now my apple tree has a trunk and leaves underneath it. So now we are looking pretty good. We've got our tree in place, and then the trunk and leaves game objects are parented to apple tree. And so if we change apple tree around, both the trunk and the leaves are going to scale along with it. And so let's click on apple tree, and then over here in the scale, we're just going to scale it up by a factor of 100%. So we're going to go 2, 2, and 2. And so now our tree has 2. Now you might also be wondering that, we're working in 3D space, but the ultimate output of this game is going to be two-dimensional, right? Based on what we saw on the demo. And, that's kind of the advantage of working in a 3D space, is you can always downgrade, I guess, or move into 2D by just positioning everything with a single camera view. And we're going to see how that works in this as well. All right. So now, pop quiz. What does rigid body mean? Rigid body means that we can add physics to this thing. So we're going to allow this object to have physical components added to it. And so over here on Apple Tree, I'm going to click on Add Component, and I'm going to search for rigid body. And don't pick 2D because we're in 3D space. We're going to do a rigid body with 3D. You can go ahead and add that, and so now you have values for mass, drag, etc., gravity, and so on and so forth. Right. So what we want to make sure of is we want to uncheck use gravity. Watch what happens when we do use gravity. If I hit play, bye, there goes my tree. That's not a good thing. We don't want gravity to occur, and that's going to allow us to have an object that just kind of floats in space there, and that's the ideal. That's what we're going for here. All right, so I'm going to hit not play. I'm going to stop play. I'm also going to hit save because I'm happy with where I am. I've added my rigid body into the space, and so now I'm going to add some color and do some things. And so we add color in Unity by adding materials to the object, and then the interplay between light and objects is created by virtue of shaders, right? So materials are things that will be applied to objects, and then shaders will be things that are applied in relation to light sources in this space. So I'll let that hang in the air just like our apple tree, and we'll see what that means in just a second. So so we're going to create a material. So we're going to go to assets, we're going to go create, and we're going to find the material item. So the assets menu is where you get all of your stuff, and we'll spend a lot of time in here as well. But what I'm doing here is creating a new material. Now, when we create a new material, you'll notice that it shows up in assets and not in our scene. It's because we can apply this new material to anything. So it's nice that this is kind of decoupled from things. We're going to create a wood grain on here. So the matte wood is going to be the name of this. And we're going to put matte_wood. A really nice guy. I knew him in high school. I'm kidding. I've never known a guy named Matt Wood, I don't think. So then I'm going to drag that onto the trunk in my scene or hierarchy. So here we go. So I can just drag that over to here, and you'll see my little arrow is going to come up. And let me see if I can zoom in on that so you can see that. You get your little arrow on the keyboard, and then I drop that in there. And so we've got the changes made, but that's going to be applied to the trunk. The way I can check to make sure that that has applied, if I look at the trunk if I've selected the trunk in the hierarchy, what you'll end up seeing over here is that there's a material over here now, and it's called matte wood, and it's got a little shader attached to it, and the shader is going to have materials that are going to be part of that as well. So so the terminology is kind of slippery at first as you get used to this stuff, but if I click this down arrow, I mean, you can see all of the different possibilities. I'm in the way here, so let me just get out of the way here in just a second here. So you can see all of the possibilities whenever I click that drop or the twirl arrow next to the shader. You can see how many different aspects of the materials we can edit in terms of how the light is going to interplay with that. We're not going to worry about all that just yet. We just know that there's this material is going to be applying to it. So let me bring myself back in here, and let's go back to our chapter. All right. So once we have selected matte wood, we're gonna go back into the assets. All right. And the assets are going to have all of those options that I just showed you on the trunk. And this leads to a really important distinction. If we have a material that we're applying to something in the scene, as long as we're not making granular changes to it on the individual game object item, then that material will be adopted from, you know, the look and feel of that material will be adopted from the main asset. So we're going to make our big main edits over here. And then if we have to do like granular edits on this, then we can. But we're getting some good instructions here. So set the albedo color under main maps to a brown of your liking. All right, so here we go. So let's click here. We get our color picker, and it's supposed to be brown. So we're going to make it a brownish color. We can slide these around. Notice you get your RGB colors in your RGB color space. You can go by real values. We can go by percentage values. We can also use HSV, which is hue, saturation, and goodness, blanking on that. It's HSV. Remind me later to look at that. I'll correct it later. But here we go. So if I am happy with my brown, get in there, I kind of adjust it. I'm feeling pretty good about that particular color of brown. I can click here to add a preset for that color as well. That helps me to go back and find that color later. All right. So I've got a little brown of a tree trunk, and so that's part of our material wood. We can also change the metallic and smoothness sliders, so we can make it looking a little bit more metallic if we want to. I think that adds a little bit of something. We can always go back and change this. And then the smoothness is going to give us a little bit of a different look. It should be okay. And we can also mess around with some of the other things, but that should be good for now. We've got a nice little tree. You can have some fun with that. We're going to create a material named matte leaves using the same exact procedure. So I'm going to go to assets again. I'm going to go to create. I'm going to go to material. We're going to see matte leaves. And then we're going to attach this to the leaves section, and here under albedo we're going to make some green leaves happen here, and I don't want this to be terribly metallic looking, and let's go with a little bit more of a matte feel to this, so not very smooth. And let's see that, oh, that is an interesting look. All right. So I think I'm happy with this kind of dull looking type of tree. Yeah, let's see. Maybe right around there. All right. I could putz around with the look and feel of my tree all I want, but really what's important is that I saved this. And just to confirm what we're looking at, we have material leaves and material wood over here in our assets, and those have been applied to the trunk and the leaves over here on our apple tree. So, wonderful. So now what we want to do is make a prefab from this this object. So we have our apple tree, looks good. We're pretty happy with it. So to make a prefab for this, we want to just drag it back over to the assets panel. I want to make sure that I do this the right way. So I'm going to drag it over to the project pane, and we'll see exactly how this goes. All right, so here we go. Drag it back over here. I'm going to keep it in assets, and then it turns this blue. So if we created any new apple trees, we would have the same basic look and feel for the simplest of them. All right. Now, Unity scenes come with a directional light already included, and we're going to set the position, rotation, and scale of the directional light in the hierarchy to the following. So pick directional light, you hit save, hit directional light, and our position is going to be 0, 20, and 0. 20, 0, right? Okay. We're going to go 50, negative 30, 0, which is what was there by default, and scale of 1, 1, and 1, right? So our light is now in a much more reasonable position, and it has a nice little cast of a light over top. I'm not crazy about the shadow, but you know, what are you going to do? All right. So the last thing we want to do is we're going to move the apple tree up and out of the way a bit. So we're going to select the apple tree in the hierarchy. And this is where you got to be careful. You got to make sure that you pick the hierarchy and not the prefab, right? So we're going to move this up a little bit in the space. And so we're going to put the position of the Y to 10. And now it is up and out of the way. All right. And so I'm going to hit save, and you know, where did it go? Oh boy. Not really sure. So, whoops, that's my other zoom. There we go. So I'm going to move back and zoom out of the way on that stuff. And there we are. So that's where our tree is located. The other thing we're going to have to contend with is the camera for here, but for right now, we are looking pretty good. All right. So now we're going to create an Apple game object for it to drop. So we're going to go to the menu bar, and we're going to choose game object. We're going to do 3D object. We're going to do sphere, right? And then we're going to rename that to Apple. When I double clicked on it, it zoomed in on it. So if I have to do a slow click, all right, so I named that Apple, right? And everything's just fine with that as it is by default. But what we want to make sure is that we put the position in as 0, 0, 0, so that it can be in a place where we can find it in our screen. And then R and S are going to be our remaining values. All right, so let me zoom out on this a bit, and that's kind of what we're looking at so far. All right. Happy. Here we go. So we're going to do material of apples now. I'm going to save. The apple's just simply a ball. Like it's just a ball. All right. So we're going to do matte. And did we say apple? Apple. All right. So we're going to do matte _ apple, right? And we're going to set the color to be a nice red. Goodness, I don't want to do too much to it. I'm going to drag this material apple over to the apple itself. and that makes that a nice red color. All right. So we're happy with that. And then once we are good to go there, we're going to add some physics to this. So just be reminded that that last step was I'm taking the material apple and I'm dragging it over to the apple itself. And then we're going to add some physics. We're going to select the apple in the hierarchy pane. We're going to add our rigid body to it. So we're going to do component. Well, we can do it over here. We do add component, and then rigid body should already be there for us. Let me get rid of my face for you here. All right. So what we should be seeing here is, oh goodness, something happened. Oops. Let me undo that. All right. So so nothing significant happened. Don't worry. I added the wrong thing. So I want to add a rigid body to this, and that's going to give it its ability to use gravity, right? Because we want the apples to drop. And so let's save that. And once you hit play, there we go. Hit play, and there goes our apple, right? So it's good. We've got an apple that is working, and we're not adding this, from what I can tell, into the project panel yet, because we are moving on. We're going to add a tag of apple to the to this. So this is what I was talking about. We said we're gonna get into the inspector a little bit further, and so I'm gonna zoom in over here and show you what's happening here. So we have the name of the object itself, and then we have a tag that we can add to this. And for this, we're gonna actually create our own new little tag for a thing. So I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna click add tag, and we're going to add a new tag, and we're going to call it apple, right? And so now we have this item is tagged with apple, and so once we have that tag in place, we can add the tag to the object, right? So once we've done that, all we have to do is so we type apple in the new tag. We did that, and then we click back on apple, and now we select apple as the tag. All right. So let me zoom in here real quick for you. Let's see if we'll do it. All right. So over here, you should see at the very bottom of your list, you should now see an apple as the tag available to you. All right. So what this is going to help us to do is to keep track of those apples as they're going on screen, and so so that should be nice and helpful for us. Okay. Now, after we've done that, we want to do two steps. First, we're going to take the apple over here. We're going to drag it into assets, and it's now going to show up as a prefab. We're going to take one more step, though. We're going to take this apple and we're going to delete it from the hierarchy and not the assets. So please make sure before you do this next step, you go over to, you take your apple, you drag it over to here, and then that makes it a prefab. And then we take that apple, we go into here, and we delete this guy from our scene. So I'm just going to go here, right click on this, and click delete. Okay. And it should delete it for me. And it was finicky there. You saw that. That was a little bit finicky. I'm not really sure what was going on there. But now that this is a prefab, we can use it to our advantage. But it's not going to be on our scene initially. All right. The next scene is we're going to do the basket. So we're going to choose game object 3D object cube from the Unity menu bar. We're going to create a basket. All right. So cube, and we're going to set the position to 0, 0, 0, 0. Let's see, it's got 0, 0. And then the S is going to be 4, 1, 4. 4 and 4. There we go. Now, as you know from the demo, we are going to create 2 more of these cubes, and we'll likely stuff these into a game object here in just a second. So let's make the basket first with a material. We're going to go to assets and create. We're going to create a material, and this one's going to be matte basket. And our color for this is just going to be some sort of yellowish color, and we'll do that. We'll just drag that over to our cube, right? So that cube is there. Actually, we're supposed to call this basket. Silly me. All right, so with the item named basket here, we have it as a yellow block, right? And we're going to create a rigid body component on that basket. So as you'll see is like once you start really working with this, if you've searched for rigid body, it's going to save your search from the last time, and you just select rigid body again. I'm pretty sure this one is going to be use gravity as false, and then is kinematic to true. All right, so we're going to have a little bit more fun with this. Is kinematic. So we'll get a sense for what that actually means here in a second. We're going to drag the basket from the hierarchy pane to the project pane to make it a prefab. All right. So let's double check to make sure. And I really feel as though we had just that one solid. Okay. I wasn't sure if he did the items in this step or not, but we got the basket, and then we, yeah, that's right. We have to do that dynamically. So we're going to have the basket, and once we have created the basket in our assets, I'm going to zoom in here. Right, so our basket's in our assets as a prefab. You can see it over here as a prefab, and we're going to delete this one here. So I'm going to hit delete, and that gets rid of it there. Wonderful. All right, so our remaining, you can see this in the book, but I want to show it to you here. We have lots of different assets and scenes. At some point, I'm going to want to organize this stuff into different folders so that I can keep my apples separate from my scripts and so on and so forth. But for right now, I think we're in pretty good shape here overall. So now we're looking at a really nice version of a game. We're getting somewhere. So now what we want to do is choose the right type of camera for this. And so our camera is going to go either an orthographic or a perspective camera. And these are the 2 types of virtual 3D cameras in the games that we might expect to use, right? So an orthographic camera projection is going to essentially be mapping to a cubic sort of view. There's the inside of the frame and then the outside of the frame. The perspective camera projection is going to allow us to view a scene from a particular perspective. When we're doing a 2D type of view, we're going to end up using an orthographic perspective on our orthographic or orthogonal camera. And so I think that's what we're going to end up using in this scene, but we'll double check how this goes. So I'm gonna scroll real quick just to make sure I didn't miss anything. But we're going to use an orthographic camera instead of a perspective one for this. So we're going to take that main camera that we have used, and we're going to set up the ability for it to be orthographic. So we click on main camera here, right? And we have it tagged as main camera, which was the bug that I had listed in notes that I gave you for this. And for the P, we're going to do this as 0, 0, and -10. we're going to do R's of 0s and S of 1 for the rotation and scale. All right. So in the camera component, here's where we make some changes. So let's be very careful about what we're looking at here. The transform looks good. Main camera, layer default, we're good. Under camera, let's twirl this down. And we have clear flags, skybox, background, that bluish, culling mask, everything. Projection, instead of perspective, we're going to change this to orthographic. And so now we have an orthographic camera. Our size for the orthographic camera, we're going to up that from 5 to 16, and just take a look at what happens whenever I do that. It now brings my my tree into the scene here. In this space, I'm going to zoom inside of Unity to see exactly what we're looking at. And let me twirl this around for you. No, I don't want to rotate things. Whoops. I did not. I just selected the wrong thing. Okay, and I'm on a Mac, so as I'm using this, if I'm using the mouse wheel, I'm zooming in and out on this space. If I'm holding down the Option key on the keyboard, and then I can use the click of the mouse to move this around here. And so what we're actually seeing in this top space here in the scene inspector, you can see the orthogonal camera here, and I'm going to zoom in to roughly what this space actually looks like here. You can kind of see our tree right in the middle of that space, and this is probably going to be a decent view for what we want to do. So I'm going to hit play. You shouldn't see much of any difference here right now, but that at least lets us see what the camera is seeing from this perspective. Right. So so happy. All right. I think we're in pretty good shape here thus far. Let's double check to make sure that we get all of the rest of the settings down here as well. Near and far, 0.3 and 1,000. Viewport rec, zeros and ones. The depth is -1, or we're going to use the graphics settings. Target texture is good. Occlusion, culling, HDR, MSAA, and target display should all be the same. You'll notice allow dynamic resolution. We're not going to check that here. All right, so our settings should be good. Just to verify, I'm going to zoom in over here and just say the only two things that we changed here were the projection and the size. So we changed from perspective to orthographic, and then our size from, I think it was 5 to 16. All right, now switching back over to the main camera, we changed a couple of settings, and now we are going to be looking at the game panel. So another contributing factor to your game view is the aspect ratio of the game pane. At the top of the game pane is a pop-up menu that currently displays free aspect. This is the aspect ratio pop-up menu. Okay, well, let's take a look at that. At the top of the game pane is an aspect, and we're going to change this to 16:9, and that narrows our aspect ratio down. So that's the standard format for widescreen TV, computer monitors. This will be good for what we're doing. Okay. So that to this point, we have created all of the assets and everything. I'm gonna stop this recording here because it's about 40 minutes long, and if you don't need to follow along with this, then if you needed to follow along with this, great. If you don't need to follow along with this, why bother? So you should be able to follow the chapter pretty well, but I wanted to make sure that you had this in case you got stuck. So we'll move on to the next video for the coding side of it.